Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? We'll wait a couple of more minutes, guys, for people to join in, and then we can start. All right. All right, guys. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Today, being the last lecture or last session on our base camp, and we are going to talk about the another type of machine learning problem that we started yesterday with the regression type of a problem, right? Today, we are going to talk about the classification type of a problem where the target variable takes the the target variable takes the definite countable value as output. Okay. We generally refer them as a classes. So if you remember in the regression problem statement that we talked yesterday, it was taking a continuous values as output. We yesterday talked about the number of bikes that can get rented out. But today we are going to talk about the classification type of a problem. So together, like yesterday's session and today's session, you will get a broad idea that how both type of problem statement can be carried out and how the solutions are generated. So I'm sure you already have a notebook, right? So do you see my screen where we have opened the logistic regression Cordalong solution? So I have opened that already from the day 8. Can everybody see the screen, guys? Can somebody confirm? Okay, so let's begin with the last session of the base camp, where we will continue with the last or second type of a machine learning problem statement. Okay, so in this session, we will be understanding the classification machine learning pipeline, as well as we will understand the expectations which are going ahead. Following the diagram that you see is the entire flow of an end-to-end machine learning solutions. Okay, end-to-end machine learning solution. The process of constructing the data science solution to a business problem is often take the following path. Okay, so the image that you see is a generic, or you can say general flow, which takes place when you want to convert, or when you are in the process of converting the business problem into a data science problem. So one, you have to define the problem. Okay, in my experience, I would say every company, every client has a lot of issues, a lot of problems that they want to solve, but you need to really drill down to the actual problem that the client is facing. Okay, so you have to define the problem in a very constructive fashion, and also in a conclusive manner, where you are concluding or you are including all the other scenarios where it might go and pinpoint. Once you define that what you want to solve, you also have to work on the data set or maybe supporting data that will help you solve the problem. All right. You just can't define the problem, or you just can't choose the problem for which you do not have a data. Okay. Because any problem that you want to solve, you must have a data. So during the problem definition stage, you also have to think it on those lines, from where you will get the data that will help you solve this challenge, right? The third stage is select and transform the feature. Now, once you have a data, quite oftenly, or I would say most of the time, the data will not be in the format that you will need it for machine learning process. Okay. If you, simple example, if I can give you, data primarily resides in one silos. So because every data resides in own their database. So when you want to merge this data, or get the data under one roof, you need a lot of transformation. Okay? If you look at the text data, the Twitter data, the Facebook data, the comments, the post, right? This data is absolutely unstructured. And being it unstructured, you generally can't take advantage of the data for some other purpose. So you need to transform the data to make sure that it is in a useful format. So that is where we talk here, like select and transform the feature. You transform the data in whatever the format you need it. Then you have to train and tune the model. Okay. So in traditional machine learning, we have tons of models. Okay. So there are absolutely hundreds of models which are used to solve the business problem. So you have to select the model that you want to train. So actually there is never a one model that you train. There are sequences of models that you train. So train those models and tune the models. What do I mean by tune? So you have to fine tune it. Okay. So let's imagine you started with a baseline model where you got maybe 80% accuracy, and then you fine tune it maybe to reach to a level of 95% accuracy. So you change model parameters, you change the data that you're using, you modify the data that you're using, right? So those are some of the steps by which you tune the model. Okay. And the last step, as usual, is use the same trained model to make the predictions. So this is where the business will start generating the money using the machine learning pipeline that you have used. Okay. So it's a long process before you make the model that are useful to make any predictions. Okay. So this pipeline is generic pipeline, no matter if you're using a regression type of a problem, or no matter if you're using a classification type of a problem, or in that case, you're using NLP or image processing or a computer vision problem statement. Right? Pipeline generally remains the same, more or less, based on some problem to problem or domain to domain. Some steps might include, some steps might go out. But yeah, this pipeline is generic pipeline for that. So before we move on, any quick question on this? Are we clear with the process? Any quick question on this? Okay. Now let's talk about each of these steps in somewhat detail to understand how that actually works in the reality. So forming a business problem, okay. A business problem is presented to you. As a data scientist, you must be able to formulate the data science problem that you would be ready to solve. Okay. So as I said in the beginning, my experience is when you talk as a data scientist to any business partner or any client, they will tell you hundreds of problems. Okay. But you really need to have that skill to formulate or to drill down what is the actual problem. Okay. You must have or soon will come up with the question of how data science problem is identified. This itself is a process of its own, and it's a very important aspect as a top-notch players of the organizations are involved. Okay. So generally, a lot of people have this query or confusion that how these problems are identified. Okay. Or what is the formula that I can apply and make sure that this problem is now a data science problem. Well, there is no actually a golden rules that can be used to confirm the problem as a data science problem. Okay. It comes maybe with experience, I would say, with some of your understanding in the business. But yes, when you talk to your consult partners, you have to sit down, understand where the problem resides, how they are impacting their ecosystem, how they're impacting their business goals, and those are the lines that goes into. Okay. So when you start your journey, maybe in the industry tomorrow, you can align with the data scientists of your company or your team, and then you can follow the path. I mean, how they generally take the path. Okay. So this itself is a process of its own. Okay. Very important aspect of our organizations, right? So as a data science team is solving a problem for the future, so the stakes are very high, and it's pretty true. Okay. The data science projects are not cheap in terms of commercials. They are very expensive projects in that manner, and not only commercials, but the stakes are pretty much high in the way we use a lot of data, we use a lot of assets. Okay. So if anything goes wrong, there are a lot of people that would be questionable and answerable, right? So data that we use might have a lot of implications, might deal with a lot of rules from the government side, from the country side, especially in the banking industry. I'm belonging to that industry, I can say that. That's why I think the reasons are the same, but why the stakes are high, because if you make any mistake, your project goes wrong. The bad part is if you put something in the production and then if it goes wrong, then it's a bad part, right? So companies even like Google, Microsoft, they are not being spared. They have been sued very highly because of the wrong implementation of machine learning models. If anyone read papers or technical papers, they would know what issues Google have faced in a recent past. Okay. So whenever you see a problem statement, try to understand the reason for the problem statement being taken up. Very important question, guys. I always believe, I mean, personally, I believe the formula of 3 whys. Okay. So if anyone, starts talking about the problems, issues, or challenges that they encounter, start asking why. Okay. You really need to understand the why part. I think I have discussed this in past on multiple occasions. You need to really understand why something is happening, right? So that's the first why. Then you understand that simple statement would come out from the counterparty. Then you really need to ask the second why. Okay, there you actually get to know the problem statement. Okay, so always, I mean, for me it works always. The three whys. If you, I mean, if you want to try, you can try that way. But yeah, you will get the crisp answers if that's what I my belief for. Okay. So we have a problem statement given below, and similarly will be provided, or going forward. So what we are talking about today is a census income data set. Okay, census income data set. The data set given below contains the census information about the attributes of individual as the feature. Okay, and the income as a target. So we are very specifically given what is the target variable. So target variable simply for us is a income. Okay, the task is to predict whether a person makes over $50K a year or not. Okay, the task is to predict whether a person makes over $50,000 a year or not. So do you think it's a classification problem, guys? Do you believe this is a classification problem? Okay. What would be the values that the target variable will take? Any idea? Absolutely right. The value in the target variable will be either 0 or 1, maybe true or false, something like that. Okay. So it will be a Boolean value. Is that correct? So let's talk about, or let's get a review of the data set. This data was extracted from the 1994 Census Bureau database by Ronnie Kohavi and Barry Becker. Okay. The data has 1032 instances. So we have around 1000 rows and 15 features. For your information, the target variable income has already been labeled encoded. Okay. 1 indicates the income is greater than 50 and 0 indicates less than 50K. Okay. So as you were talking about, it will be either 0 or 1, or it can be either true or false. Okay. So it's already labeled encoded. So 1 simply means the person earns more than 50K. 0 means he earns less than 50K. Okay. Let's quickly look at what are the features we have. We have the age, we have the work class, we have the final weight, we have the education, marital status, occupation, relationship, race, sex, and all that. So basically we have the demographic information of individual, and then we have a last column as an income which we are interested in. Okay. So there are 14 columns as a independent variable, and then there is a last column which is our target variable. Okay. As we talked yesterday, traditionally the step or the process starts with the EDA part, or what generally known as exploratory data analysis part, where you try to understand the data that you have received. You try to uncover some of the insights out of the data so that future or the downstream task can be decided in a very predefined manner. The next stage is to collect and prepare the data required to solve the data science problem. And as a data scientist spends about 60 to 70% of his time at this stage. Well, I think 60-70% is a very short time that it is mentioned here, but I think 80 or 85% of your time would go under a data engineering. Okay, like getting the data, cleaning it up, managing it up, massaging it up. All those tasks will go under this stage, and that would constitute around 80 to 85% of its time. Okay. We will be conducting 2 to 3 code along every month. Okay, this is just an information session. So what we will start with is we traditionally start with the pandas module, or I'm sorry, the uh, library import steps. So first we will import pandas, NumPy, then sci-fi skew. Don't worry, we'll get to it. Then again, as I said earlier, in the last session itself, anything that you want to do related to machine learning in Python, the go-to library always is sklearn or scikit-learn. Okay, so we are simply saying sklearn.preprocessing, label encoder, standard scalar. Okay, don't worry, we'll come to each one of them in a detail. Then we are selecting model selection, train test split k-fold. From sklearn.linear model, import logistic regression. So yesterday, if you remember, we imported the linear regression. Today we are importing the logistic regression. Then from metrics, we are importing accuracy score, classification report. So as the name suggests, these are the metrics which will allow us to evaluate the model performance. Okay. We are reading the data set. Usually the first step that we do is we read the data set. Okay. And if I just do a head, or if I just print it, I would get the same data set which we are talking about here. Okay. So age, work class, final weight, education, education in number, marital status, and so forth. What we are interested in is this column, income. Okay. The best way to, or I think the first stage or first command that you should always run is dataframe.info. Okay. That tells me a lot of information, which is I'm very much interested in. So I have 103 entries, 32 entries. From this, I can confirmly say that I think there are no null values that are available to me, correct? If I say describe, is there any special, what you can say, special observation can I make it? We can just quickly look at it. So if I look at the age column, the minimum age is 17, the maximum is 90, the average age is 38 approximately, not bad, and that looks good. There is nothing you can say alarming here. Right? Income, again 0 and 1, we know that. Hours per week, so the minimum is 1, maximum is 99. So this looks little dummy, because I think we can't work 99 hours a week. I think maybe that's not allowed or something like that, but we can check that part. Right? Education, I think, has a 16 categories, because I see minimum is 1, maximum is 16. Right? So it can be seen that there are no null values in any of the columns. So it is pretty clean data set, right? We are lucky enough. The minimum, the 25th percentile, the median, the 75th percentile values for the columns capital gain and capital loss are 0, right? So this is surprising. Do you see that? This is pretty much surprising. See that? So everything in between the 5-point summary is 0. So that is something we'll have to investigate. Does it make sense, guys? So the use of describe is this. Okay. You easily get the summarized view of all of your numeric columns in a one shot. Okay. You have to carefully read it to understand if there are any alarming points that you receive. And this is the alarming point for me. So I can make a note somewhere that I have to detail study these 2 columns. Okay. For further analysis, split to bring, I'm sorry, all the continuous variable together and all the categorical variable together. If you remember, even yesterday we did the same thing, isn't it? We took out all the numeric columns in a one way and we dealt in a different way to all the categorical variables, right? Similarly, we will do it here as well, but we will do it in a more sophisticated fashion today. So if I simply say data frame, that is the name of my data frame, dot select D types. Okay. So select D types will basically allow you to choose the specific type of a column. I would say include NP dot number. So whichever column type is numeric, only that will be considered into data frame underscore con. Okay. Con simply stands for continuous. Okay. And I'm creating another data frame as cat data frame dot select D types. Now look at the difference here. In one say I'm saying include, in the another I'm saying exclude. Is that clear, guys? So we are simply creating two subsets of the data frame. One of them will only have the numerical columns, another will have only categorical columns. Is everybody clear with that? Any question? Guys, are we clear with this? Okay, now the next step, obviously, as we already said, that the next step would be a visualization stage. Now, why visualization? Because I think visualization is the best way you can do a data analysis or EDA. I mean, more visualization helps you do a very easy way to study the relationship in the databases. Okay, so plotting a stacked bar chart, have an estimate of the number of people with income above and below 50K with respect to each of the categorical feature. So what we are planning to do is we're just planning to understand what is the relationship or what is the feature in people having the income above or below the 50K. What are their characteristics? Okay. So simply using a loop. So for I in data frame dot cat, so the categorical data frame dot group by, right? So I'm just doing a group by on income because my income has a two values, isn't it? Zeros and ones. So I'm just saying group by. Okay. Value counts. Why value counts? I'm just counting the number of records for zeros and number of records for one. And then I'm just putting a bar chart for it. Okay. So if you look at it here, so this particularly is a work class because I'm using group by of I. So one by one column will be taken out. So if you see here, the blue says 0, the one says orange says 1. So 0 means people who are earning below 50K. Is that right? And 1 means people earning above 50K. Correct? So we are just trying to see how and where the people or the distributions is happening. So if I clearly see here, we have a large number of population in the private sector, right? And they earn less than 50K. There is very short, basically in all the sector, I have a very small proportion of people who are earning above 50K. Okay. If I little go down, then this is education. So obviously people who are 10th, 11th, 12th or first year or maybe schooling level people does not earn more than 50K. There are hardly few cases. But yes, people with higher degree, I see there are higher fraction that people earns more than 50K. Especially if you see here professor school, some college, high school graduation, bachelor's, right? So that makes sense, right? The higher education degree you have, there are higher probabilities that you earn more than 50K. Does it make sense, guys? Any quick question on this? As far as the numeric columns are concerned, what we have to do is first we check the distribution to make sure do we have any heavy skewness in the data. Okay. So again, we will do the similar story. We will use a for loop. So for I in data frame continuous, then I'm just putting up a title and the histogram. So this time I'm using a histogram. So if you look at the age, definitely my age do not follow the normal distribution. And it clearly seems that I have a left skewed data, right? I do not have many people who are above 60. There are few cases I have, correct? Similar to that, even if I check the final weight, again, I'm very highly skewed on the left side. Education number also looks like not many or not very much normally distributed. And capital gain, capital loss, we have already marked as an investigation columns, because if you look at here, I have a majority of the people who are close to zero. Is that right? So I have majority of the records where the value of capital gain and the value of capital loss is pretty much close to zero, right? Hours per week, I mean, it has a huge spike, and which is true. A lot of people work 40 hours a week. Is that right? So it is quite obvious that I would see a very high spike here. There are few people who work 60, 70 hours a week, but this looks pretty surprising where people work 100 hours a week. Okay. But yes, this is normal because huge population of the world works 40 hours a week. Okay. And yes, income, we have zeros and ones. So obviously, we will only get 2 bars. But again, this, okay. Is the data set, do you see it is imbalanced data set, or do you think it's a balanced data set? Yeah, what do you think, guys? Is it a balanced data set or is it imbalanced data set? We have talked about it. Okay. The balance and the imbalance data sets signifies what is the distribution of the classes in your target variable. Now, if you see income is my target variable, do you see the proportion between 0 and proportion between 1 is similar? Or do you see it is comparable? Or do you see it is evenly distributed? Yeah, guys, what do you think? It is not evenly distributed, guys. I have huge number of record for class 0, but I have very less number of records for class 1. That is why this type of a problem statements are called imbalanced data set. If you look at credit card fraudulent transaction, out of millions of transactions, one transaction gets fraudulent. That is a highly imbalanced data set. If you look at cancer detection problem statement, out of hundreds of people, there are only few people who are detected as a cancer patient. Is that right? So the distribution between the two classes in my target variable is highly uneven. It's highly not balanced. That's why it is called as a imbalanced data set problems. Okay. So the next step is, again, once we do a EDA or once we understand the data very well, the next step is a data engineering, or I can say feature engineering, where I try to modify or try to rectify some of the data points. Okay. So here what I'm trying to do is majority of the values in the capital gain and capital loss are 0. Is that right, guys? Because when we look at the graph, this two graph, we are 100% certain that the majority of the value in these two columns are 0. Is that right? So what I need to do is majority of the values in the capital gain and the capital loss are 0. So let's remove those columns, which makes sense, right? Because if I have a 90% of my values as a zeros or nulls or missing, I can't do anything on it, right? I have to remove it, correct? So what I simply do is data frame dot drop. I provide both the column names, capital gain, capital loss, and in place is equal to true. So I simply remove both columns. Okay. There is another sophisticated method that I wanted to show you today about checking the skewness. Okay. So basically, so far the skewness what we were checking was using this visualization method, right? This. So we were said, okay, this is left skewed, this is right skewed, and so what. But there is more sophisticated fashion in which you can quantify how much skewness do you observe. Okay. So let's look at it. I'm creating a new column, maybe a new data frame as a skewness. PD dot data frame. Okay. In the data, what I'm creating is name. What is the name? It is just nothing but a data frame continuous variables headers, or you can say the column names in the data frame continuous that we are using so far. And I'm calling another column called SKEW, that is Q. And if you remember, we imported one function here, skew. So from sci-fi dot stats import skew, right? So we are using the same function here, skew, and I'm just passing my data frame into it. Okay. So in the skew, I'm just passing my data frame. The result of it is I would get in the name, as I have used the column headers. So I'm getting the column names, age, final weight, education number, hours per week, and income. And on the right side, I'm getting a skewness parameter, or I guess I'm getting the value that is defining how much skewness I have observed in the column age and in the final weight and in the education number and so forth. Okay. The result of it is the column final weight, okay, is a very highly rightly skewed column. In which it's obvious, we have already seen it here as well. So the positive value that you would see here, the highly positive value that you would see here, that defines it is a right skewed data. Okay. And the negative value that you would see is a left skewed data. If it is less than 0 or maybe close to 0.23, we are okay with it. But the moment it goes beyond 1, right? It goes beyond 1, then yes, the data is very highly skewed and we have to transform the data in order to be utilized in the subsequent task. Okay. So age is fine, education number is fine, hours per week is also fine. Income, we will just go ahead and maybe get rid of because this is a target variable, so we don't want to deal with it. So the only column we have to deal with is a final weight. So the column final weight is a highly right skewed column. Remove the skewness using a log transform. So you might have a question in your mind, if I see skewness, how do I remove them? Or how do I deal with it, right? So the best option to remove the skewness is to transform the column. Transform column using root, transform the column using logarithmic, or transform the column using maybe any other variation that you might want to do it. But that particular method will help you transform the values from a skewness to non-skewness. Okay. So in today's example, we are going to talk about the log transform. And then again check if the skewness has been removed or not. Okay. So what I'm simply doing, data frame final weight, that is the column, equals to np log 1p. So basically log raised to the 2, that is a function that we are using. And again, I'm passing the same function, same column name. Now if I check the histogram, so plt, that is plot.histogram, and the column name, I still don't say it is a randomly distributed or it is less skewed. I'm sorry, it is not skewed, but it is far better than what we were seeing here, isn't it? So it is still better than the earlier version of it. What do you think? So basically, we have successfully, you can say, you know, lessened up the skewness weight. Is that right? Earlier, the skewness was very high. Now, at least the skewness has come into the check. Now, these are the operations that we do it on the categorical variable, right? Generally, the bar plots and all that would we do it generally on the categorical variable. Any quick question, guys, before we move on, whatever we have seen here? Any quick question, guys? Urmi, if you don't remove the skewness, your machine learning model will be biased. Imagine I am passing this data to my machine learning model. So currently, if you look at it, my data is very much dense in this location. I mean, for this values. But do you think my model has this values as well? What do you think? We have a dense population for this point or till this point, but I don't have any values for here as well, right? So my model will be biased towards those records where I have a highly dense value, right? My model will never learn these values because I don't have a examples for it. I don't have a records for it, isn't it? That is why it is generally suggested that when you pass any column to machine learning model, make sure that it has even number of samples for each distribution. Otherwise, my model will never learn about these values because I have never passed or I have never shown those values in the training. Second major problem is, imagine in the training, I didn't have any value for, let's say, this 100,000. And what if my prediction, or let's say in the production, I received a value or a record with this value? My prediction will be very badly incorrect because in the training, I never saw this example because my data was biased towards this one, right? I hope I'm making some sense. I hope your question was answered. Are you asking this function, Prathamesh? So it is under a numpy function, numpy log 1p. Maybe we can check. I'm also not pretty much sure. So log np dot log 1. This is a mathematical function, helps user to calculate natural logarithmic value of x plus 1 where x belongs to all the input array of elements. Does that make sense, Prathamesh? It is a natural logarithmic. Yeah, Prathamesh, does it make sense? Is the question clear, or maybe did you get the answer? Well, Prathamesh, it is simply taking x. So x is nothing but your input elements. So if you look at it here, where is it? Oh, here. Every value in the final weight column is your x. Okay. So that's what it is saying here. And I'm taking a natural logarithmic for the value of x plus 1. So if my log final weight has a value 100, I'm just doing 100 plus 1 and taking the natural logarithmic for it. Well, it is a function of 1 plus. You just have a log as well. I mean, the choice is perfectly yours. See, guys, try and understand. I think I have said this yesterday as well. The transformation and the number of transformation is endless. Okay, is absolutely endless. You can do only log, you can do only square root, you can do only plus 1 square root, you do plus 2 square root, right? So that's why I said the choice of transformation is absolutely endless. Okay, you have to work it out, or you have to think it on those lines, that which transformation is generating more reliable results for me. Are you getting my point? If doing 1 plus logarithmic giving me more reliable result, then I would use it. Is there a logical sense behind it? No, there is no logical sense. Maybe the distribution of value in my column is such that my 1 plus logarithmic is working more better than the only log. I don't know if I'm making sense, but in the industry, that is how we generally work, or we generally how think. If I have to do plus 1 and then logarithmic, it's okay, because that is generating a better result for me. In some of the series, it will only work fine with maybe logs. In some of the series, it will work only square root. I mean, a simple example, in yesterday's session in the linear regression, why did we choose square root, and why we are choosing log 1p today, right? There is no answer, right? Because we trialed it, and we know that log 1p works better than the square root. Simple. It's always trial and error. There is no what you can say gold rule book, that if you're working with column age, then the transformation of square root will work better. No, there is no rule book. You first try with square root, check the skewness, check the distribution. If you think it is still not good, no problem, go back to maybe log transformation. Okay. So Prathamesh says there has to be a logical sense on how data is being modified to my convenience to get even distribution. I guess it depends on the data on the hand. So that, I think Prathamesh, that's what I'm saying. There is no rule about the data that you use and the transformation you use. You get the data, you try different types of transformation, and then come to a conclusion. Okay? So it always depends on the distribution of your data. Okay? There was a question from Akshata, I think, why we use this one. Is that right? Right. So this one means the axis. 0 means rows. So basically, when I say data frame, the name of data frame dot drop, capital gain, capital loss. But where these names can be found in data frame? Can I find these names in the row indexes, or should I find this name in the columns? Are you getting my point? Because our rows also have identifiers, correct? So basically, if we say 1, then my Python interpreter knows that these two names are the column names, and I have to delete these columns. If I say 0, what will happen? Any idea what will happen if I say 0? Yeah, it won't find it, because if I say 0, then Python interpreter will imagine that this is a row identifier. Do I have any row with these names? No, I don't. I have rows with indexes. Okay. So 0 means rows, 1 means columns. Is it clear, Akshata? Any doubt, any question on that? Okay, cool. Okay, so doing all that stuff brings us to the similar story that we did yesterday as correlation coefficient. Okay, again, I'm not going to spend much time on it because we have looked at, I think, 2-3 times now. Simply using a heat map from the Seaborn, right? And I'm just putting a numerical correlationship on the plot. Again, this is one of the colors that somebody want to use it, so you can use it. Otherwise, there are many more options we have. Okay, but prioritarily, I don't see any very strong relationship between any of the variables. Okay, that's the key point. I really do not have any columns where I have a strong correlationship. Now let's talk about some of the important concepts, right, which you have seen earlier is label encoder. Okay. Now, if you recall when we were talking about the types of data, right? So you remember we talked about nominal and ordinal data. Do you recall that? Right. Do you recall what is the difference between the nominal data and what is the ordinal data? Any differences do you recall? Now basically, right, what we have to do is in the machine learning world, when we get a data, right, and when it is in the categories, right, especially if you look at it here, maybe if you look at the data, now one of the major disadvantage of any machine learning problems is you can't pass this text data as it is. Are you getting my point? We can't pass this state data as it is because we know the fundamental problem of machines or computers, they don't understand the textual data, right? Now, if I carefully observe this, all columns that I have as a numerical part are nothing but a categorical data, isn't it? In the education column, I have distinct number of classes, bachelor's, high school grade, 11th, and so forth. Similar to that, sex, I have male and female, only 2 classes. Race, I have white, black, and so forth. Relationship, I have again limited number of values like not in family, husband, wife, and so forth. So in order for us to utilize these columns in any machine learning process, we have to convert this column into a numerical columns. Okay. Because we can't use the textual data in any of the machine learning model, we have to by default convert them into a numerical column. So how do I convert this into a numerical column? How do I convert this particular columns into a numerical columns then, which also preserves the meaning of a column, right? So I have to convert these columns into a numerical column such that the meaning, the information also is preserved and I don't lose on any of the information. Okay. So that process is particularly called as a label encoding in the machine learning world. Okay. It process is the call as label encoding of the categorical values. So basically in a very human's language or a very nutshell, what we do is we provide the numeric value to each unique category. Okay. We provide a numeric value to each unique category in the categorical column. So for example, if I take a column 6, what I will do is I will provide number 1 to maybe a female and number 0 to maybe a male. Did I convert that into a numeric column, guys? Yes, no? Did I just convert a categorical column of male and female to a numeric column, right? Have I also preserved the values? Have I also preserved the meaning of it? Yes, I did. Because I know that the 1 is female and 0 is male. Correct? That process is basically called as a label encoding process. Okay. Now, do you think we will do it manually? That we will sit and we will manually do it? Okay, 1 is male, 2 is female, Do you think we'll do it manually? Of course not. Okay. So that process can be automated using a label encoder. Okay. So if you recall, we imported label encoder here from sklearn dot preprocessing import label encoder. Okay. So we just initialize the object of it encoder. Okay. Now, for which column we want to do the label encoding? Of course, the categorical column, right? We don't do it for numerical column. So what I'm simply doing is for column in data frame underscore cat. Do you remember we created this data frame here? We created this data frame here, data frame underscore cat, right? So I'm just utilizing the same data frame again. So data frame cat underscore call is equal to LE. What is LE? LE is nothing but the object of my label encoder dot fit transform. So this particular fit transform method will first understand how many categories I have into my column, and then it will assign those values. So if you look at it, there are two words. First is fit, right? So fit will understand how many categories do I have, how many numeric values I have to assign, and then transform will assign those values. Okay. And as a result of it, look at it now. Earlier, my sex had two values, right? Male and female. I have now 1 and 0. Marital status was earlier married, never married, divorced. Now I have 4202. Is it clear, guys? So this entire process is what we call as a label encoding process. Okay. Any quick question on this, guys? Any quick question? Well, you can get it through the LE also. Okay, let me do that for you. Basically, you won't get the map, but I think you won't even need it. Okay, let me do that for you. Something called we use inverse transform. I'm just trying to use that. But basically you won't directly get it. You will have to use the inverse transform for that. Directly you won't get it. That's the straight short answer. All right. The problem is I have already converted this data frame. Maybe let me reload it again so that I can show you. Now maybe I can run it. Yeah, so if you see state government has got 5, self-employed not included 4, private is 2 and so forth. Okay. Similarly, male has got 1 and then female has got 0. Do you see that? So basically I have used the inverse transform mechanism, okay, and I've used the print of column names for you, right? So that is why it is working this way. But I can do a more transformation if that is what we need. Is that guys clear? What are we doing? I don't know if that will make any sense to you, but basically there is no direct way that you can get this map, but you can use a logic of inverse transform. So if you remember, here we are doing a transform. So basically you are converting the categorical value to number, right? I'm just doing an inverse of it. I'm getting the categorical value from the number. I hope that makes sense. Yes, guys. Is it clear, guys? Yes, no? The next step, obviously, we are going to concatenate both the data frames that we are individually working on. So data frame of con and data frame of cat. Okay. Because those are both individual data frame like continuous and the categorical. Again, I'm saying access is equal to 1 because I want they to be concatenated on the column basis, right? I want them to be combined on the columnar fashion, not on the row fashion. And the result of is just giving the column names, okay, using dot column fashion. And if I use the new data frame dot head, I should see something like this, where all my categorical values are now converted to the label encoders, right? So there is no text column I have any longer, basically. Is that clear, guys? What are we doing here? Are we all clear, guys, what we did here? Then there is simply one thing I'm trying to do. I mean, again, not a necessary step. If you look at it, my target column has shifted in between because of the concatenation, right? So I just want to shift this column. So I'm just saying column 4 and column -1. So I'm just shifting the column. Again, not at all required step, but just in case if you want to do it, you can do it. Okay. So what I'm doing is just look at the difference. The native country was at the last column here. I just shifted this column here. And I just took this income column to the last part. Is it required? No, not at all required. But again, just for your information. Okay. Now, as we have done the data visualization to understand the EDA part, we have done some sort of data pre-processing where we converted the categorical value to the numeric value. So that's what we call as a data pre-processing in a way. And we again concatenated both the columnar and the continuous data frame together. Now the real process of machine learning will start. Okay. Again, we know how to split it, right? So we are split between X and Y. So X will have my all, you can say the feature variables or independent variables, and my Y will have only the target variable, the income variable. There's something new concept called as a standard scalar. Did we discuss it yesterday, guys, by any chance? No, right? We didn't discuss what is standard scalar yesterday. Another concept, a new concept for you guys is, if you look at this data, do you think each of this data is on the same scale, or do you think all the columns are of a same magnitude of order? No, right? One of my column is in hundreds, like 39 or 50. Second of my column looks like in the fractional point numbers. Some of my column is in just tens, like ones and zeros, fours, right? So the problem of, or the point of saying is, no matter which data set you get tomorrow, today, anytime you work on it, none of your columns or none of the all columns will have a same magnitude of order in the data. Some might be in lakhs, some might be in unit, some might be in tens. The problem with machine learnings are, if you pass this kind of numbers, right, the learning will be pretty slow for machine learning, right? Because models will have to switch, or models will have to adjust their learning steps according to the magnitude of the orders. Imagine you are passing 100 column to your machine learning model. Okay. Imagine you're passing 100 columns to your machine learning models, all the columns with a different magnitude orders. Okay. When it comes to the learning, see, ultimately, every machine learning model has a formula behind it. Is that right? Yesterday, when we looked at the linear regression, it had a formula, y is equal to mx plus c, right? Imagine if I'm passing different magnitude order of columns in this formula. Every time I pass a new column with a different magnitude, the problem is the learning will be pretty slow, because every column will result into something different magnitude, and your algorithm have to switch back or have to readjust its calculation. Okay, that is why we call something as a standard scalar is a process where we convert everything to a same scale. Okay, so in a nutshell, standard scalar is the process where you convert all your numerical variable to a same scale so that the order of magnitude is the same. Why it is required? Well, I'm not saying, well, if you go to the books, any machine learning books, they don't generally say that it is a required step. Okay. However, if you ask me personally, I would say it is a mandatory step, because you can try it for yourself. I mean, try creating a model without scaling and try creating a model with scaling. You will immediately look at the difference between the performance. Okay, because if I pass the same scale values to my algorithm will learn fast because all the columns are on the same scale. My column or my performance will be on the higher side because mathematical formulas will do not have to reshift their values because all the columns are on the same scale. And that's exactly what we mean by a standard scalar. There are two types of scalar. One is a min max and second is a standard scalar. So one is min max scalar, second is standard scalar. Okay, so basically both of them works in a different way. I can give you a formula if you want. It's pretty simple, guys. Pretty simple formula. Mhm. So this is the basically formula. This is the standard scalar basically. Okay. So x of I minus q1 divided by the IQR, or you can say the interquartile range. It is a complicated formula. There has to be a simple formula as well. Mhm. So min max scalar is this, right? So this is the min max scalar, where the value minus minimum of the column divided by max and min of that column. So if I'm doing it for age, so every value in the age column would be value minus the minimum of the age divided by what is the maximum and what is the minimum of the age column. Okay. I think Prathamesh has posted a link. I think this is the best, you can say, formula. X minus X minimum divided by X max minus X mean. And if you look at the standard scalar, it's X standard deviation into max minus mean, I think. Yeah, good. See X minus mean divided by X max X minus mean. When go through this link, guys, it's pretty simple. It just theoretically it simply means you just have to convert everything to the same scale. Okay. The result of it, okay, it's pretty simple. You initiate the standard scalar as a object. You do again fit transform. Now, if you print the result on the screen of this standardization is pretty similar. See, every value that I have received now is on the same scale. Do you see that? Every value now I have is on the similar scale. None of my column have a different magnitude. Now the learning of my model would be more efficient and more faster. Okay. The next obvious step is we are going to divide between the train and test. We have already discussed sufficient, I think, yesterday on this train test split. The last part is model building. Okay. So we train a machine learning model on this data. All the ML algorithms, both supervised and unsupervised learnings, are used here. The output of this model is then used to figure out the right insights for the business and solve the problem. Okay. So basically what we have done so far is do all the data engineering world and then just split it between the train and test, which are then utilized for all your machine learning models. Okay. Again, I think there are more instructions about your further classes that are going to happen. Okay. Basically, there are a lot of topics that we are not touching today, being a base camp session, but there are a lot of things like hyperparameters is one of the important concept. But again, that will be more discussed in your detailed version of the classes that you will have it. Right? Okay, before we talk about the model, any quick questions on whatever we done so far? Any quick question, guys? Okay.
Puneet?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kamlesh.
Yeah, Kamlesh.
Yeah, in the starting slide where we after the implementing the libraries, where we have defined. Just a minute.
Sorry.
Yeah, in the starting where we define the libraries, all the like importing the numpys and all these things, and after getting the data frame that info, what if we get the null value over there?
I think we have discussed this, Kamlesh, that null values you'll have to treat it based on case to case. Okay.
Okay.
You might have to discuss with your business, your stakeholders that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What I'm saying is, in the after that where we have described it, na. So here that mentioned, it can be seen that there is no null value and in any of the columns, so it's pretty clean data set.
yes.
So for null values, so what it will be have to do?
I'm sorry, but I'm not able to understand your question. What is the question that you want to ask?
I want to ask, we found the no null value over here.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a clean data set. And what if
Yes.
we have the null values?
So that's what I said it, right?
Okay.
When you get a null values,
Hmm.
you have a two choices. One, you can either delete that column,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Second, you can treat that null value.
Okay. Okay.
So when you say treat, you can replace the null values with some other values.
Okay.
Now you have to decide what that other value can be.
Okay.
It can be average, it can be median, it can be mode, it can be some user specified number, right?
Okay. Okay.
But that
Got it.
decision has to come out with in a discussion with your business.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah,
Good. Thank you.
yeah, sure. Okay, so yesterday we looked at one of the linear model called linear regression, which were trying to fit the linear line between the independent variable and the dependent variable. Now that particularly algorithm worked fine because my target variable was continuous in the nature, correct? However, what we are dealing today is not the continuous variable, but we have a categorical variable where the classes are only two. We just have a two distinct classes, which I have to predict. Okay. So the linear regression will definitely not work because linear regression will try to fit the line, right, between minus infinity to plus infinity. Is that right? So the target variable in linear regression would be minus infinity to plus infinity. Is that right? Yes, guys, no, yes, no. So we can't use that model because in our case, in the logistic regression, the outputs is very limited between 0 and 1, right? So what we do is we use a version or a variant of a linear regression that is called as a logistic regression, which primarily uses a cost function called sigmoid function. Okay. Again, I'm not going to go into much of the detail of that part because I think it needs a lot of other understanding. But what basically sigmoid function does is it's a mathematical function. It can take any positive value and it will convert it between the zeros and ones. So basically the job of a sigmoid function is to squash any positive integer number from infinity to infinity and it will convert it between 0 and 1. Okay. So we use a sigmoid function in the backdrop of a logistic regression. Okay. Which will now convert all my larger numbers between 0 and 1. Okay. So I can show you something. So if you look at it, it makes a S shape. Okay. So as I said earlier, you can pass any positive number to this sigmoid function. The formula for sigmoid is this. Right? The formula for sigmoid function is pretty simple. 1 divided by 1 plus e raised to minus x. What is minus x? Minus x is nothing but all your independent variables. What is e? E is nothing but the epsilon. Okay. And the result of is you will get a S-shaped values where every possible values that you have passed as an x will be converted between 0 and 1. Okay. So that is the same function we are going to use in the logistic regression. So again, the similar fashion that we did with linear is we initialize the logistic regression model, okay, in the log reg. The two steps which are again common to the linear regression is logreg.fit. So this will train the model. I'm just passing X train and the Y train. So the feature variables and the target variable. The next obvious step is predict. Okay. The next obvious step is predict, but I'm here only passing the feature variables of the test class. Okay. So if I print ypred here, I get the predicted classes. Do you see the result of my ypred is between or is only a classes, zeros and ones. Okay. Any question, guys? What happened here? How it happened? What we did? I understand logistic regression is pretty not simple to understand in one go, but as I said, see, in linear logistic regression is a variant of a linear regression where because we cannot fit a straight line because it has a minus infinity to plus infinity value, we convert or we pass that particular value to our sigmoid function to get it converted between the zeros and ones. And that exactly zeros and ones, we use it here as my outputs. I can share someone link. The wonderful people who have explained it better than me, I think. Yeah. So this is what I'm talking about. You pass any positive number and we can convert it between zeros and ones. Okay. This is not. Mhm. There's a Medium link that I want to share it with you guys. It's a wonderful link. Even you can use this one is good, the machine learning master. Now, the way we evaluate the linear regression and the way we evaluate the logistic regression has to be very much different because the target variables in the linear regression was continuous. However, the target variable in the category in the logistic regression is a classes or a distinct classes. Okay. So the evaluation would be pretty much different as well. The first one is accuracy. Okay. In the regression, we never had an accuracy. Okay. And always remember, in the case of a regression problem statement, you will never have accuracy. You will only have accuracy in the case of classification problem statement. So accuracy I'm getting as 0.81. So 81% accuracy. Okay. Now I can show you something. Okay. The evaluation of classification models are pretty much different. Okay, and has a lot of things to cover. But I'm just going to give you a brief of it because if I give you too much of information, you will either get scared or you will not understand anything out of it. Okay. So the first thing we build is an classification is first is a confusion matrix. Okay. if you look at this is a 2 by 2 matrix. Okay. And this particular image is what we call as a confusion matrix. Now, if you look at it on the x-axis, I'm printing the actual values, right? And on the y-axis, I'm printing the predicted values. So what are the actual classes and what are the predicted classes? Does this x and y-axis are clear, guys? Any question on this? What is x-axis? What is y-axis? Any quick question on this? On the x-axis, guys, we are putting up the classes that we have already in our target variable. In our case, it is 0 and 1, right? Positive and negative. When we do a prediction, we will also do a prediction on the positive and the negative, right? We are simply now putting the number of occurrences that are happened. Guys, is it clear? Does it make sense? Yes, no, maybe? On the x-axis, right, we are putting up the predicted columns, right? How many values I have predicted in my class in my target variable? I have predicted negative and positive, right? Zeros and ones. In my actual value, also I have negatives and positives like zeros and ones. I'm just simply saying how many classes were actually negative or actually zero, and how many of them are predicted as a zero. Do you see this table, guys? Can you see this table? Guys, do you see the table on the Excel that I have just opened up? Basically, the confusion matrix is a 2 by 2 matrix that I'm saying. On the x-axis, I'm putting up the values that I have predicted using a predict. On the y-axis, I'm putting up the values that are originally with me as a truth value. In the truth value, in the column that I have already as my target variable, I have two values, right? Zeros and ones. So if I predicted the values, I also have zeros and ones. Here, when I made a prediction, what is the output that I got? Zeros and ones, right? So I have zeros and ones in my actual as well. Now I'm simply counting how many records were actually zero and how many of them I predicted as a zero. So I can say maybe 90. How many of the records were actually zero, but I predicted as one, maybe 12. Are you getting my point? Do you get the difference? I'm just saying how many records were originally had a zero value, but I predicted as zero or predicted as one. Is it making any sense, guys? This is a classification problem. So I'm assigning the classes to every record. I can assign a zero class to it. I can assign a one class to it. Correct? There is no other value. Similar to that, if my actual value was one and I wrongly predicted it as a zero, maybe as a for 15 values. And how many of the records had one as an original class and I also predicted correctly as 100 as a one class? Do you see how this become a confusion matrix? This particular, guys, is an original value. This is my original classes. And these are my predicted classes. I'm saying how many of the records originally had a zero label and how many of them I actually predicted as a zero. And this what it constitutes as a confusion matrix. Right? That is what it says. The actual was negative, positive, and the predicted negative and positive. Okay. There are two more concepts like precision and recall. So if you look at it, this table carefully, on the y-axis, as we said, we have the actual classes, zeros and ones, and the x-axis we have again zeros and ones. So if the actual record had a negative class and if I predicted it as a negative, then I called it as a true negative classes, right? Because it was originally negative and I predicted also negative. Okay. And if the original class was negative, but I predicted as a positive, so it becomes a false positive because I falsely predicted that record as a positive when it was a negative in the original case. Okay. And based on this concept, there are two concepts that are created as a precision and the recall. So precision is nothing but true positive divided by true positive plus false positive. So basically it says how many of the predicted positive records are the actual positive. Okay. It simply says out of total predicted positive, how much is the actual positive. And second is a recall where it says true positive divided by true positive plus false negative. So it simply says out of actual positive class, our model is how much able to correctly predict as a positive. I know confusion matrix is really confusing and I'm 100% sure you won't get it in the first attempt. All right, guys. I have people in industry who are not clear about confusion matrix even after 7 years of experience. Okay. But it is a simplest concept, guys. It is just putting up the counts based on what the actual value is and what the predicted value is. Simple. Okay. When it comes to the implementation, we simply use a confusion matrix as a function, which we have derived it from the class matrix. So when I do that, I will get something like this. It simply has the actual values and the predicted values. Guys, is it making any sense? I don't know, maybe 0.5%, 0.10%. Is it making any sense? So when it comes to classification problem, never believe on the accuracy, okay? Because accuracy is not the correct measure. That's what I was trying to show you here. This link is so beautiful. If you read it carefully, thoroughly, tomorrow you will be a pro in confusion matrix, okay? This link is really beautiful, very powerful. What is F1 score? F1 score is a generic mean between the precision and the recall. Okay, so it's 2 into precision into recall divided by precision plus recall. So it gives me generic mean between the precision and recall. I'm sorry. Accuracy is nothing but true positive plus true negative divided by all four. That is it. That is a accuracy we have. I don't know if there is a formula here, but okay. That is what the F1 score and the accuracy are. Confusion matrix I have already told you, right? I don't know I should cover this or not. Something called as a hyperparameter tuning, okay, and a grid search. These are very advanced topic, guys. I'm not very sure if I surely, talk about this now or not. Every algorithm has a hyperparameters, okay, which are the, so what is hyperparameters? Hyperparameters are those parameters which are humanly specified, which are specified by the programmer. Those are not learned by the algorithms. So simple example, in the linear regression where we had y equal to mx plus c. So if you remember, the m and c were learned by the algorithm, right? Did we provide any value for m and c? No, right? It was learned by algorithms. But there are some parameters in the algorithms which are not learned by the algorithm, it is provided by the human. So those are called as hyperparameters. Some of them are penalty. Again, it is a very advanced concept. I don't know. I'll not go into much of the detail because it requires some of the prerequisite knowledge to understand what is penalty. And there is a C, which is a cost argument. Okay. And there is something called as a grid search CV. It is called a grid search cross validation. So the original idea behind doing this is, how do you tune your model on a different parameters? Okay. How do you tune your model on a different parameters? Now you have a choice whether you can manually change the values of this parameters, right? So if you see here C, I can manually change this value one after another and run all the algorithms. Okay. Or I can ask my machine to do it rigorously for myself. Okay. So that is what exactly we mean by grid search CV. So it will check L1 with all these values. It will check L2 with all these values. And then it will generate the best possible model for me. So if you see here, I'm saying grid search CV estimator is the model that I have created, logistic regression. Parameter grid is the grid that I've just created as a parameter. So I want my grid search CV to identify two hyperparameters, penalty and C. What is the evaluation metrics that I'm interested in is F1. So whenever I receive a best F1, give me that what is the best parameter combination. Okay. So again, I say grid search dot fit, grid search dot predict. When I say grid search dot best parameters, so this is the choice. This is the combination that I have got. So when C is equal to 100 and the penalty is equal to L2, I have get the best possible model. Now, if I compare the accuracy, even though it is not changing a much, so only F1 score is 4571, even that is not changing, right? So the point of saying is, in this case, it did not change, okay? But generally, when you do hyperparameter tuning, you will receive a somewhat better result than the baseline model. I know, guys, that I have not covered grid search CV maybe in detail, but it is for your betterment, I guess, because it really needs a lot of other understanding. Okay. Okay. What is penalty? I can answer Shiva Lakshmi, but I'm really not sure how much you will get it. Basically, penalty is a parameter which is used in algorithms to make sure that whenever the algorithm predicts very wrong value or the wrong value in a very high tandem, it penalizes that. Okay. It penalizes that particular record. I don't know how can I explain that, but let's say you have 5 records, okay, and your model predicted first record correctly. When second record came in, your model predicted it very differently than the actual value. Okay, so let's say actual value was 1, and your model predicted maybe 100. Right, so the magnitude of getting a wrong is very high. So you need to penalize that kind of record so that model understands that the next time if something similar happens, I will be penalized, right? So it learns it. Whenever I penalize my model, it learns better. So my model will try to identify more better relationship, more better properties, so that the next time the prediction comes in, I won't be so wrong that I was in the first iteration. Are you getting my point? In a technical language, if I don't know if you will get it, but in the technical language, the coefficients of my model gets penalized. I'm sorry. The coefficient of my models gets penalized when my model gets wrong in a very high manner. Okay. I'm sorry, guys, but I don't know how many of you that you will get it. L1 and L2 penalty. It's a very technical term, guys. Very technical terms. It is called as the regularization methods. So if you can see here, my model coefficients are getting penalized. We have to know if there are any pictorial format here. I highly doubt there would be any pictorial format. I don't know, Shivaj, but did you even understood what I was saying? We add a new term in the coefficient so that it gets penalized. If you see here, there is L1 and L2. We add this additional penalty term. So it's like in a very generic way, if I say it, if you make a mistake, you will be charged with a fine, right? If you do a right thing, you will be rewarded with some benefit, right? That's exactly what happens in the ML model as well. If you make a wrong prediction, you will be penalized. If you make a right prediction, you will be rewarded. That is exactly what we mean by penalty. Did you, I mean, I don't know, Shivalakshmi, does it make any sense? I know majority it won't, but it's a very advanced concept, guys. I mean, it needs a lot of understanding of other topics and practice before we talk about penalties or grid search CVs, that stuff. Yep, yep. I'm sure you will. I mean, it's just a matter of reading and practicing to something, right? I think we have reached to an end, guys. I think that is what the last part was. I'm sorry it didn't took break today because I know we would have finished it quick earlier. All right, guys. So this is the end. The time has come. Any question on anything that we have learned, maybe today, maybe in the last sessions? I hope the Basecamp session that we conducted over last 4 weeks was somewhat helpful. You understood some of the concepts. You got a flavor of what is Python, what is machine learning, how they are implemented, how they are worked upon, how they are implemented in a different flavors. Yes? Guys, yes, no, maybe. I hope I was able to make you understand some concepts. So yes, guys, I think we have reached to an end. Any question anyone has? I think you have my LinkedIn connection. We are on the Slack. So not only today, but even in the future, if you think you are stuck somewhere, you need help, you need, or you think I can help you in any fashion, you can let me know. I can definitely try my best to help you guys in whatever manner I can. Right? It's a very fast field, guys. So you'll have to keep yourself grinding. You'll have to keep yourself engaged all the time. I'm sure you will have get a flavor by looking at the topics. That the topics are very big. They're very vast. It goes into very much depth, right? So you really need that much amount of efforts coming in as well. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for being patient enough, right? Thank you so much for joining every session, for your time, for dedication. I hope you continue the same, maybe in the future as well. You learn it very frequently. You keep on practicing. And if you have any challenges, maybe you can connect me on anytime if you want. And maybe we can answer any questions you guys have. Okay. Any last minute thoughts, guys? Any last minute question you want to ask? Okay, I see there are no more thoughts. All right, guys, then I think thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much again. We'll be in touch, right? Have a good day, ahead, guys. Have a good future. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, sure, Prathamesh. Thank you.